Something is wrong. Things have not returned to as they should be. We have apparently switched bodies.
Coming up, Spock encounters an out-of-body experience that threatens to undermine critical negotiations with an alien species and destroy his engagement.
What the hell is Enterprise Bingo?
Not a clue.
Number one and Lon shed their tough exteriors and try to have some fun as they investigate the lower ranks game of Enterprise Bingo.
And Strange New Worlds gives us a nostalgic blast from the past.
All this and more coming up on Energize.
Energize. Energize. Energize.
We're boldly going into the uncharted regions of the Star Trek universe before James T. Kirk.
You're listening to Energize, a Star Trek Strange New Worlds podcast, your source for in-depth analysis, colorful debate, and exciting discussions about the new adventures of Captain Pike and the Enterprise crew. I'm your host, Anthony McLemore.
And I'm Steve Truitt.
This week, key negotiations vital to the security of the Federation are put into jeopardy when Spock and fiance T'Pring accidentally switch bodies.
Here's a warp speed recap of Strange New Worlds Episode 5, Spock Amock.
We must prioritize our relationship.
Of course. T'Pring, I am sorry the negotiations commenced unexpectedly.
Yet we agreed this time would be for us. I'm concerned that your time in Starfleet may be causing you to behave in a manner so human. We may ultimately find ourselves incompatible.
You told her you were going to be home for dinner, and then you weren't.
A Vulcan soul sharing.
I have failed to see your point of view. This will change that.
Solim, Somnage, et Survalum.
Something is wrong. Things have not returned to as they should be. We have apparently switched bodies.
We have a situation with the Rongovians. They refuse to talk to anybody but you.
What?
Captain, we have undertaken a ritual to share our Katras.
We have switched bodies. We seem unable to switch back.
Get out of town.
You're not in a town.
All right, Anthony, as we start out this episode, I have 11 words for you, but I think you know what those words are, so sing them with me. Da, 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 da. So last week when we were on the show, we made fun of the fact that they didn't use that music yet. And what do you know? In the opening scene, and as I predicted, I got to say this, I predicted that it was a dream sequence. Spock is fighting himself for the love of his woman in a ritualistic battle brought about by her. And they brought in that, and as soon as that first note hit, I'm like, that's the music I was so psyched about it.
I couldn't believe it. I was literally just cheering because I was wondering, hey, how far are they gonna do the throwbacks and tip of the hats to the original series? And they completely did it. And it was like one of the best things because it's an iconic song. Anybody who knows original series Star Trek knows the Captain Kirk fight song. And so they completely did it. And I was just like, yes.
And it wasn't just that, right? So this is what I liked about the direction from Rachel Lederman was it was a set, obviously, much like the original series. It had that red sky background. It almost looked fake. And if you watched Amok Time, which was the season premiere of season 2, where Spock has to go back to Vulcan and mate with his girlfriend, for lack of a better word, or he dies. Yeah, the Pong Far, right? And he ends up having to fight Kirk. That's where the music comes from. And if you watch the show, if you YouTube Amok Time, it's the exact same weapons that they used. And this is what I loved about it. When Vulcan Spock cuts human Spock, it's the exact same cut in his shirt that Spock in the original series gave to Kirk. I mean, it was like almost shot for shot. And one more thing, like the large, faraway master shot of the fighting was just like the original series. I mean, it was like an original fan's dream come true. It was awesome to watch.
Which has been spoofed several times because it was done in The Simpsons. Mr. Burns was betting money on the fight. It was great. It was great. It was great. Now, I'm going to be honest. This was an episode that I was not too keen on because when we discussed the sneak peek for this week's episode, I was like, okay, this is going to be a complete comedy episode. Here we go. They must have run out of money when they did last week's episode because the special effects were, spectacular. And I'm always leery of these episodes. Now, there've been some good ones, and I don't want to completely poo-poo. They've done really good comedic episodes, but there are a lot of bad episodes that you clearly knew that, okay, we blew out the budget in the previous week, so we need a couple of episodes.
Let's make it funny. Yep.
What I call the dialogue episodes.
Right.
But I will say this: I was completely surprised. So they had me in the beginning with the whole fight sequence and the homage to the original series. So that was really, really good. And then as we started picking up, I was just like, okay, this is actually funny and cool.
There was humor throughout, which I was grateful for, because look, the first 4 episodes, which I think they needed to do, established that they are in space and that's dangerous, and they're on a 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, and could be perilous. And they take a break and they say, look, let's chill things out. And I was worried last week after the destruction, rather the damage that the Enterprise took in that battle during Memento Mori. I thought, they may forget about it the next episode rather, and we'll just pick up somewhere. No, they went back to Starbase 1, which I loved, and they needed repairs. And I just love, even though it's episodic, they're still kind of following a thread, and it just was beautiful. So to follow up on your point, after that 3-minute appetizer, which was just red meat for all of us fans, we get into a pretty serious topic, and it reminds us of the first episode where T'Pring is saying, look, I want you to be my husband, and it seems like you're choosing Starfleet.
I'm concerned that your time in Starfleet may be causing you to behave in a manner so human. We may ultimately find ourselves incompatible.
And I think this was a very relatable story, and I think that's what sucked me in, because I personally can identify with this storyline, because when you have, my wife is a career person. I'm a career person. She runs a company, and, I have my career as a producer director. And so those things do come in conflict when you have a career, high performing careers that demand an extreme amount of time. And your personal life is the one thing that gets compromised over and over again. And so for me, watching this was definitely relatable, and it was something that I'm familiar with, and so it sucked me in because I wanted to see how they work through this. I thought that maybe at the end of this episode they would break up.
I did too, and the thing I loved about it is I didn't know where this was going to go, and I'm going to share your feelings last week too. I have said every week on this podcast, to my wife, to you in person, I don't know how long they can keep up this really great pace of high quality and great story. And last week I thought next week's not going to be good. I saw the teaser, we talked about it, Spock fights himself. I thought, oh my God, how silly. But I also said on this podcast, and go back and listen to it, it's probably a dream sequence, and it's not going to be most of the show. And I hate to keep admitting I was right, Anthony, but I was right. This was a wonderful opportunity. You know what it reminded me of? Kind of like a Seinfeld episode. You had 4 or 5 different stories going on at once, but they all weaved in with each other. And it really was centered around Spock's, Spock's confrontation with his fiance, who understands that he has a duty to fulfill, but she's still a woman and she still loves him and she wants him around.
I chose not to work even while I too had important work to do. A shared acceptance of mutual sacrifice is crucial to a successful relationship.
Yes.
And to your point, again, this is very, very relatable because even though they're Vulcan, even though they're logical, even though they are seemingly separated from emotion, they really are tied to their emotions. It's just more of a control thing. And in many ways, and I'm going to try to figure out the best way to say this, she still behaved in a way that a fiance would, in the sense that I need your time and I'm not getting that time and I feel jilted by it. And there have been plenty of times in my own relationships where I said I would, hey, we're going to have this date and I'll be there at 7, and I end up either getting there later or I had to cancel because of work obligations. And so I right off the bat, I was just like, oh, yeah, I know that one. And she felt jilted.
I have been in that situation myself in the past. I think that, they always say the number one thing that couples fight over is money. I think it's priority. If you prioritize money, then you're going to fight about it. In this case, it's duty versus connection. And and this is what I found the most fascinating, is that even though T'Pring, who is fully Vulcan, and Spock, who is half Vulcan, and they always mention that, she's the one who's like, I need you. She's the clingy one. He's the one saying, I'm bound by duty, which I think is a really great juxtaposition. And I'm going to say it again. I say it every week, and I always surprise myself by saying this. I just love the way they're writing this show. It's as if they really sat down and said, how can we just kick everything out and start over and really just create a great show? And I just love it. I love what they're doing.
And not only are we talking about the dynamics of their relationship, what the writers are delving more into is the internal struggle that Spock is having between his human half and his Vulcan half.
Yeah.
And that's
made clear in the dream. Yeah.
Exactly.
He fights himself. So, okay, what does he do after a series of events which forces him to recognize that he is not paying attention to his fiance? He says, listen, quite logically, let's share our katras. Let's merge together in this sharing of perspectives so you can understand where I'm coming from. In other words, it's almost as if you remember the scene from Star Trek Into Darkness when Spock, risked his life on the planet and Uhura gets upset with him. It's only when he explains to her that he doesn't want to die, but that the impending death meant more to him because of what he would lose, that she finally understood where he was coming from. So plug that into now. He just wants his girlfriend to know that he loves her, right? And what he's going through.
Solim, somnage, et survalum.
So they begin this process of the Katra ritual of sharing of perspectives, and it goes wrong.
The effects of the ritual have not dissipated. We have apparently switched bodies.
This happened after Spock had a conversation with Nurse Chapel in which she slapped him.
I found myself in an impossible circumstance where I was unable to reconcile my many different. It is not a human gesture I'm familiar with.
For not being considerate, not understanding
Right.
where T'Pring was coming from, which was a nice surprise, actually. I was
Right.
like, did she just slap
Right.
Spock? I think she did.
Yeah.
Yep, she slapped Spock.
There's a great moment there. How many stories do we know where a girl smacks a guy upside the head and says, are you an idiot? You're not even seeing the point. That's an eternal thing.
Oh, yeah, that's happened in real life. I've had many friend girls in my life basically proverbially slap me and, just say, dude, what are you doing? You're not
What are you
paying
thinking?
attention.
Sure.
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
So basically she illustrated that by actually slapping him. And I thought it was a pretty cool moment.
Not only that, Anthony, but it sets up the entire theme of this episode, which if you really had to boil it down to one thing, it's what Pike says at the end, and we'll get back to this later, but it's really radical empathy. Are you able to truly understand the other person's perspective? That's sprinkled throughout this entire episode. And so for Spock to have radical empathy of T'Pring's feelings, they do this meld, and boom, next thing you know, it's 22:30 Freaky Friday.
Yes, you nailed it on the head. And when I watched this, I was like, this is Freaky Friday.
It's Freaky Friday,
Yes.
Vulcan edition.
I like that. I like that. And the thing is,
Yeah.
though, I wish we were able to do these things because I just honestly think if people were actually able to feel what the other person was feeling, I think
Yeah.
many problems would be alleviated just because you would actually, because it's sometimes very hard to express it in words. And other people, even when you're saying things in words, people can't see it. But to be able
Yeah.
to share your thoughts and your feelings, you're able to truly see something from someone else's perspective. And wow, I just wish we had that gift.
Well, me too. And I think those who are radically empathetic do have that gift. And it's also a burden because when you can understand everybody's feelings, it's pretty overwhelming because you take on their pain, and that can be a pretty big rock to carry as well.
And I'm pretty sure
but-
it could be paralyzing to make decisions sometimes when you know everyone's perspective.
Right, when you know how it's going to impact people. Exactly. And this is what I love about Pike is that he seems to be someone who can consider all angles and just effortlessly make a choice based on what he sees. He's the one who quoted radical empathy in this series, or rather in this episode, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to skip forward because we are going to talk about other stuff.
Logic dictates that I ask if there are any circumstances under which you would accept our offer of rehabilitation.
At this point, no.
Spock in T'Pring's body now has to go and get Baja and rendezvous with him. And the question is, do we take him in? You know, he's obviously a character, a fugitive. Do we take him in or do we let him go? They're giving him the opportunity to make his case.
Humans evolved from apes, did they not? You've kept many of their charming qualities, it would seem.
I would caution you to stop insulting my companion.
And all he does is insult Chapel, who's a human, and Spock. He thinks he's talking to T'Pring, but he's actually talking to Spock, saying, how could you even be with a half human? And that doesn't go well, does it?
You listen here.
Perhaps we should keep the details of how exactly we captured Barjan between us.
Spock's human side went ahead and did what the average human would do if somebody was insulting their human parts. And so he was insulting his friend Nurse Chapel, but he was also insulting Spock's human half.
So, he pops him one, knocks him out. And, this character, Baja, I don't know who it is. We may see him again or not. I don't know. It may be in canon. I actually don't know. I didn't look it up. No matter the case, what we're really seeing here is Spock gets to see himself represented through those who are speaking to his fiance. There's your radical empathy. It's an ability to see that. Conversely, now, T'Pring, who's in Spock's body, has to go and negotiate.
The Rongovian Protectorate controls a small but vitally important piece of territory in between Klingon and Romulan space.
Right after this wonderful 3-minute opening scene, we're engaged in diplomacy. And Robert April, who I am so glad is part of this series, because he was actually the first captain of the Enterprise, becomes admiral, hands it over to Pike. I love the chain of command here. It's really great. Pike calls him Bob. It's just fantastic. And April is setting up Pike for a meeting with the Rongovians. Now,
what is this? We have been waiting in our ship while you are here discussing our upcoming negotiations.
This is a race of people who are being courted by virtually everyone in the galaxy to join them. So you've got this Captain Vaso and his XO Brax, and they show up early and they're pissed and they want to meet with Pike only. And they want to get into a diplomatic debate. Spock's there. But what we see early on is a pattern with the Rongovians, that they're meeting with all of these people, but some people they like, some people they don't. What's Pike's plan here?
Well, I mean, the thing about Pike is that, Pike is Pike. He does things rather unconventionally, and he's very sincere. So he kind of goes straight at it with the joke right from the very beginning. I would have, prepared a meal,
Yeah, right. He's a warm guy, and you're a very warm fellow. I tend to think I'm kind of an affable guy, and it's always a little alarming when you say something nice or charming and someone just stares at you stone faced and you're like, okay, that didn't work. That was my best stuff. So throughout this episode, what we're dealing with here is, again, another example of we're not communicating. I want this, you want this, and we're kind of sticking to our own guns. And it's when in the negotiation table, when now they've given up on Pike and they've asked, quote unquote, Spock, who's really T'Pring in Spock's body, to now sit down and negotiate, that T'Pring has to now show her side through Spock.
As a Vulcan, I sympathize with your fears that you will lose your culture to homogenization in a multilateral alliance like ours.
And at first, it doesn't go well.
Oh, because she completely lays out her insecurities and her fears, voicing through Spock's body.
Which was like,
Pike is like, oh no.
Hold the phone, hang on. And that's the thing. So,
hold on, wait a minute.
Yeah, hang on. Well, so here's the thing we left out, that so it's discovered at one point. Pike comes in to grab Spock because it's like they want to talk to you. And at that point, T'Pring and Spock have switched and they're trying to act like they're each other. That doesn't work. Finally, they look at each other and realize it's logical to tell Pike what's going on. Pike laughs at first. And then he's like, wait a second, you serious? Oh, shoot, we got to deal with this.
Get out of town.
Yeah. And there's that thread of humor just going through the whole thing. And here's the beauty of it. And again, I want to credit Rachel Lederman, the director here, who I think deftly maneuvered between canon, some really old classic stuff, some new stuff, and even at the end, playing a jazz song, which I didn't recognize immediately, but was just kind of this 1990s jazz piece that I loved. She just really brought so much nuance and so much depth to this episode. So here they are. The Rongovians are in a place of, we can go anywhere we want. We can go with the Romulans, the Klingons, the humans, the Federation. Why should we join the Federation? And no one has had a good answer until T'Pring starts to struggle and Pike goes, look, I'm breaking in here. What does he do?
He went rogue.
If I may, Spock, it is a noble sacrifice you've made to spend so much time away from your own culture.
It is?
Yes, it is.
He says, listen, I'm just going to be straight with you. What do you get out of the Federation? Not much. You dilute your own species. You become part of a collective. You have to then, share values and identities with other people. What do we get out of it? Extra security. We definitely get a big portion of this. What do you get from the Klingon Romulans? Something a little different. Yeah, you're right. It may not be the best thing for you. And Admiral April's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he was completely shocked. He was just like, okay, I don't know where this is going. He wanted to basically pull him back. But I think that, Pike is smart. He actually saw an opportunity. I think first he was trying to protect Spock and protect the situation that they're in. But then he always defaults to, something that's at his core. And he just ended up just being sincere, which is who Pike is anyway.
To answer the question, why the Federation, one need only look across the table, Captain Bassel. You, Mr. Spock, are simply everything that is great about Starfleet.
I love Pike. And I think, the thing about him is that he introduces the idea, and the theme of this episode is radical empathy, but he doesn't overdo it. And I think, I really liked Discovery, but I feel like Discovery is over the top. I feel like Strange New Worlds is really an impossibly perfect mix of canon and new stuff and, everything that society should be, while going back to the original ideals of Star Trek, the Gene Roddenberry vision, without shoving it down your throat, just being there. And he says it.
No, I 100% agree. I like Discovery season 1 and 2, and we've discussed 3 and 4.
Yeah.
It did get smothering with the lectures. I do like, teachable moments and things like that. But if you're as a writer, you have to do it in a way where it doesn't come down heavy.
You're right. It's show, don't tell. And the thing about Discovery is they tell, they don't show. And Discovery just, if you want to lead, you lead by example. You don't talk to people and tell them this. It's just, I love all Star Trek. I just feel like Discovery kind of lost its way. And I think we get the theme of this episode, but there's a whole other genre, a whole other vibe going on here. And that is the underlying and much welcomed humor that was sprinkled throughout this show. And we saw that in the juxtaposition of the shore leave and then of Una and Noonien Singh staying on the ship.
What did you have planned for shore leave?
You kidding? They don't shore leave, they shore stay.
All right. The nickname.
So, the cool people are going down for shore leave, and it's revealed. What do they say about Una?
Where the fun goes to die.
That's right. And I love this aspect of this, because so far with Una, what we've seen is duty, and we've seen a reveal of who she really is as an Elorian.
We've seen her as a counselor to Pike.
Counselor Pike calls him Chris. But what we haven't seen is the woman that says, yeah, I know I'm uptight, but.
Why do you let it bother you? Where fun goes to die.
It didn't bother me. I just hadn't heard it before. Have you?
No. And I don't care.
I don't either. Just not knowing makes me feel out of touch.
So when Una and Noonien Singh decide they're going to stay on board, the first thing they discover is that there's a couple of ensigns and they're messing around, and they get caught playing Enterprise bingo.
Do you realize what kind of trouble you're in, Ensign?
I was an ensign once, too. I understand being nervous.
It was Enterprise bingo. We were doing Enterprise bingo. I heard you.
What the hell is Enterprise bingo?
Not a clue.
And at that point, I think that they both wanted to have some fun. Number one and
Yeah.
Lon. And so,
Without a doubt.
Exactly. So they go into this whole good cop, bad cop thing with the two,
That was so great.
crew members. And I just thought that it was hilarious what they were doing. And
What's funny about that is that Una was the good cop. That's what surprised me.
well, she lost it because La'an claimed bad cop first. Because remember, they were standing outside the door. She's bad cop. And she's like, damn it. And so it was really, really cool. And I just enjoyed the sequence of events, because once they discovered this thing called Enterprise bingo, they're like, what are we missing out on? So they tried on, themselves and try to play the game.
1, 2, 3.
Right here! Destination. Engineering.
Woo! Oh, okay, fine. Damn it. Okay. Best 2 out of 3. Go.
And I think, one of the things I loved about that was, and I don't know who's in charge of this, but it's as if I can't even explain it. I don't know who's doing this, but they're just doing a phenomenal job, because when you think about catching these ensigns at Enterprise bingo, that's lower decks. Like, they're just throwing everything into this series without muddying it. It's just, everything is an homage. Everything is done just right down the middle. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. And so, of course, and then we get to see the montage of the bingo games that they have to play.
And flavor check.
Spearmint again. Wow.
Does the gum taste run out and get refreshed when you get re-energized? How fast can you say which deck you want to go to on the turbo lift?
Lowest setting. Ready? Aim. Oh, that really stings.
And I love the Western style.
The phasers, it's phasers at 10 paces. Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome. I was just like, they're really having fun, and it would be fun to play Enterprise bingo. I was like, I would do that. I would do all of that stuff. It's hilarious, and those are really the types of things that happen in lower decks. In real life.
I think so. I think you're right. And I think, just beaming someone out and back again to see if the spearmint is refreshed is such a genius idea. And that's a total lower deck thing to do. Yeah. And the phasers at 10 paces.
One thing's for sure. No one's signed the Scorch like this before.
And we're 100% sure the force field will hold.
99%, at least.
Truth is the thing that, and I loved how they ended the episode with this, the thing that actually got me, it gave me the chills, was them standing out in a force field on the transom of the Enterprise. There they are, right at the end of the saucer section. And I don't know how to explain it. I get a little emotional about it because I love this Enterprise. I love this version of it. I think it's the best one since the original series, or at least since the Enterprise A. And there they are, and you could see all of it, and you could see the nacelles and the Bussard collectors spinning. And what a beautiful, beautiful homage to Grand Central Station. And I'll explain this in a second, that they have to sign the Scorch. In 1999 or 2000, Grand Central Station was given it's in New York, it's where all the trains come in from other areas. Grand Central Station was given an entirely new remake, but they kept one square of the original station the same in the ceiling. And when you walk through Grand Central Station anywhere, or rather anytime in New York, and you look up at a certain area, you could see that one square from the original station. And to me, that's what this Scorch area was. You go out there and you sign the area that's never been replaced in any retrofit or any repair. And I felt emotional about that. And they look up and they see this solar sail ship leaving, and I don't know, man. I loved it.
But I think it was really good to see more of the friendship between number one and La'an. Also, you realize that La'an is still just completely divorced from emotion. She's there when everybody's beaming out the shore leave. Got to make sure it's done right. And number one is just completely oblivious to the fact, is oblivious to how the crew sees her. And they're coming to terms with that. And I think I thought that was really, really cool. And then they try to have fun and still none of it's really fun. They did all these things. They're forcing themselves to play Enterprise bingo and run the list, but nothing meant anything until they went out to the top of the ship.
And there they were at this space on the ship that represented legacy, that represented timelessness, that represented struggle and honoring the past. It surprised me at how much it touched me that's what the last piece was. It was a love letter to the ship itself. And I just, last week I thought there's no way next week's going to be any good. And this was one of my favorite episodes, which I can't believe I'm saying because all the other ones have been so good.
No, I was completely shocked. I went into this really negative because, like I said before, this was going to be a dialogue episode, and let's get in tap with our emotions and blah, blah, blah. But I was pleasantly surprised and humored, and I really enjoyed it. It was good.
I agree.
Here's a sneak peek at next week's episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
And I met years ago.
He rescued me from another shuttle.
Seems like you have bad luck with shuttles.
Or good, depending on how you look at it.
Well, allow me to welcome you all to Enterprise.
Your new uniform is very yellow.
Oh, it's gold, technically, because I'm a captain, so.
Well, on behalf of Majalis, we thank you for your help, Captain Pike.
This is my number one. Una, Lieutenant Commander Una Chin Riley.
Allow me to take you to the ready room to debrief.
But first, I must insist you take us to your medical facility.
Of course, right away. Chief Kyle will escort you down. Sorry, are you the boy's father?
Strictly in a biological sense.
Well, from that clip, it looks like Pike has a blast from the past, a past love interest.
Which is always a great thing for Star Trek, because we know from Kirk and Carol Marcus, you know, they had a son together. They've introduced this boy. We don't know who it is, but I think it's going to be interesting to see. But you know what? We've been wrong about the plot several times by trying to predict what's going on. So who knows what could happen next week? But I do think it's going to be good.
Well, what I'll do is I'll settle on this. When you see that there's a blast from the past, it's just another good opportunity for more backstory on Pike.
Yeah, and he seems to be flustered by this woman. And so, as I mentioned before, I'll be really, really curious to see how Pike responds to both that kind of situation and some situation where someone is killed on his command or he makes a mistake. I've been waiting for that. I know it's coming. So I'm looking forward to that.
You're going to will it into being.
I'm willing it into being, just like I willed. Listen, they heard us last week with the music and they put it in. I'm telling you, they heard us talking about it and they put it in there.
It was great. It was great. One of the fine moments of the show. Well, that wraps up this week's edition of Energize. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
I'm Steve Truitt.
And I'm Anthony McLemore.
Live long and prosper.